I want to unlock creative flight, but in order to do that, we need to progress through an entire age of technology and unlock one of the most important multi-blocks in the game. Easy peasy, right? Well, in order to get through the low voltage age, we're going to have to turn those electronic circuits we made last time into even more useful machines. But first, my island is an absolute mess, and although I want to wait to do any extreme base expansion for when we can fly, we should probably clean this up. Starting with a bulk storage solution, I begin to craft a colossal chest to dump our items into, and boy does it take an immense amount of logs. But it also makes a really fun sound when you open it, and it looks sick. We can make this thing even more functional by combining it with a terminal from Tom Simple Storage. It is a really cheap craft for us now. So I even upgrade it into the crafting terminal. And after attaching a chest hatch to the colossal chest, we can integrate a GUI storage and crafting system right into our base. My favorite part of this is moving the items. I bought a magnet from the shop, and oh my god, I get to go to ASMR City, dumping thousands of items into this thing. God, that is good. We're also gonna need a ton of stress units today, so we should probably do a diesel engine upgrade. Only we don't have any more andesite, and I really don't want to sift through more dirt. But did you know that you can actually dig through dirt for infinite andesite without even sifting it? We can hold down shift right click while looking at dirt and extract copious amounts of free rocks. Andesite is forever. With our 69 nice iron nuggets, we can make plenty of andesite alloy, and the diesel engines are not a difficult craft at all. What is trickier is that we still don't have potatoes or pumpkins automatically entering the farm, and we're gonna run out of our supply pretty quickly, so we'll need to entirely move our farming setup. I move our existing large farm over to the diesel production and construct an entirely new second one using a Gregtech multi-block feature where they can actually share each other's sides to make them cheaper. After some mechanical arm shenanigans, potatoes and pumpkins are flowing like potato and pumpkin juice? Oh, and for the rest of this video, assume that I am always making more steel, and we're still gonna run out, but that's spoilers for later. With the engines activated, I can't help but feeling like my, brain is being punched through my ears repeatedly, so I opt for a nuclear solution here. I downloaded the Muffler mod and freed us from the shackles of this miserable sound design. Like, why can you not mute these? But hey, after that, I saw a solar eclipse, and that's probably a good sign for what's to come. And lickety-split, I move all of our machines to a new area, clearing up a bunch of space, and I even dropped some new flooring in to shake it up a little bit. Things are looking good. And now we got a clean base, so it's time for some machining. In Gregtech, until you hit the late game, the ultimate goal of your machines is really to make more circuits. They're kind of our only way to progress. But you need circuits to make machines, and now we face the ultimate dilemma. Do we bulk craft circuits now when they're expensive to make the machines easier to craft right now? Or do we wait to bulk craft circuits until we have a bunch of machines in order to make circuits cheaper, but the machines take a lot longer to make? I prefer to start with my machines to make my circuits easier, which is definitely the path of most resistance. But it does mean we get to make a bunch of cool stuff. First on the list of resources we have to improve is wires. It takes forever to create plates from ingots and cut the plates into wires, and it has terrible yields. Instead of all that, we can make a wire mill, and we'll be able to turn ingots directly into wires at an even better ratio. The wire mill requires a new item, the LV electric motor. It's a micro part that we're going to be seeing a lot more of for the rest of the game, as it appears in almost all tiers of machinery. Thankfully, because of last episode, we have all the materials we need to make the wire mill, and it is ours. Problem is, it needs power, and our base is pretty much running entirely on spin and spin alone. But what if I told you we can turn spin into power? Create New Ages in this pack so we can use an absolutely enormous magnet to turn RPM and stress units right into standard modding power FE. We've got to make a generator coil, carbon brushes, and some magnets in order to generate the power, but the only magnets that we can make are of really poor quality, so in order to actually upgrade them, we need the power, so we have to make the magnets to make them better. So of course, for now, I set up the machine, which is kind of a pseudo multi-block consisting of the coils spinning rapidly inside of a ring of magnets while attached to the carbon brushes. Routing our new feeble power supply into an energizer, we can actually electrify gold and diamonds in order to upgrade the tier of our magnets from the low power magnetite to flux magnetite, which just explodes our power supply from 100 FE per tick to 1.2 thousand FE per tick. But you'll notice I'm not routing the power into the wire mill, I'm routing it into something called an LV energy converter. That's because Gregtech isn't like other girls. It has its own energy unit called EU, which we have to convert our FE into first. Now, I'm not here to go into the specifics of energy in Gregtech, but all you need to know is it's 4 times as expensive as FE, and it adheres to the same tier system of LV, MV, HV, and above. Oh, and if you use the wrong tier of machine on the wrong tier of power, they explode. With EU being produced, we can finally hook the mill up with solarium wires. Solarium's a really simple alloy we made earlier by converting sand into soul sand with witch water in a large barrel, grind that up, and combine it with Invar. And after all those steps, we can finally turn a raw ingot right into 2 wires. Yes, 2 wires. Well, 2 wires, 1 time size. You can make higher density wires by crafting them together. For instance, the converter actually takes 2 times size wires. This is still the most efficient way to make wires for the rest of the game, and it will save us so much time and so many resources in both circuit and machine crafting. And once we've built up a respectable amount of wires, we can squeeze a few more circuits out and reach for our next major time save, the lathe. The lathe is going to make our rods so much better, but as always, it's going to require some additional micro crafting to put together. God, once we have it, it is so simple. We just hook it right into our wire system and boom, 1 ingot into 2 rods. No more 1-to-1 crap. And at this point, the addiction grips my soul. I am just compelled to add a bending machine to the line for 1-to-1 plate recipes. With wires, rods, and plates running automatically and at their best ratios, we finally have a solid foundation for making our most important parts. And now it's time to dive even deeper into the machine line and create the fluid solidifier. I want the better tier raw rubber recipe, and we need a fluid solidifier for that, but in order to make it, we need electric pumps, which are just one of God's little tests to craft. Even just looking at this recipe overstimulates me. I had to run around forever making knives and rubber rings and smashing together incomprehensible recipes for rotors and whatnot, but our handy machines held steadfast, and I walked away with a small handful of our first electrical pumps. In a fluid solidifier, we can now turn 1 bucket of latex into 4 raw rubber instead of just 3, which does turn into mega rubber stonks in the long run, but as I write this script, I kind of realize the lengths I'm willing to go to just see a number go up by 1. We can now make the sister machine of a solidifier, the extractor, really easily, and it allows us to turn ingots and blocks into their fluid forms. Combining that with the solidifier, we can make circuit components at ridiculously cheap rates. Glass tubes can now be made at a 1-to-1 ratio instead of a 3-to-1 ratio. That's insane. And on top of that, I craft up the forge hammer, which can automate the hammering of cobblestone into gravel into sand. And if you know the Create mod, you have no idea why I did that. Me neither. Forecasting a need for more LV circuits, I go on a glass making spree and come away with a stupendous amount of glass tubes that we're going to eventually turn into vacuum tubes. But we can push the efficiency just a bit further. The assembler is one of the most useful machines in Gregtech, as it can make things like electric pumps without using tools and is essential for crafting many items. Right now, all I covet is its ability to make vacuum tubes and resistors at an insane discount. The LV assembler is not a cheap craft though, requiring all of the LV micro parts and a total of 4 circuits. Conveyor modules aren't really a struggle, but the robot arms are the most expensive micro part from any tier, requiring plates, rods, pistons, circuits, and small gears. God, I send myself into a spiral of crafting and invention, but eventually I arise victorious from the sawdust in possession of our first assembler. And by the way, these videos take a lot of work, so why don't you assemble a like and subscribe on the video? It really helps the channel out. Not only can that assembler make circuit components way cheaper, but we can also unlock the next tier of sieve mesh, which is integral to our push for creative flight. You see, we need an MV assembler in order to achieve our lofty goal, meaning we need to make one of the most expensive machines of a tier of technology that we don't have. MV circuits require diodes, which need a dust called gallium arsenide. And gallium is something we have, but arsenic not so much, and flint meshes grant access to an ore that we can use to process into arsenic. But we're gonna need a huge amount of flint in order to make the 25 meshes that I want, and while I was grinding out the gravel, it finally hit me that I've been an idiot and somehow forgot crushing wheels existed. Like, what kind of Create mod player am I? I whip up a pair of them and we start bulk processing stone into gravel into sand, but we'll need the forge hammer for dust still, so I guess it wasn't a waste. While I'm waiting for my sand to finish, I start crafting a stupid amount of vacuum tubes and turn my attention towards making glue. We'll need slime, which we can get from Slitaki spores. The spores are really easy to get large amounts of because we can just dupe them with a bit of witch water inside of a large barrel, and then we smelt the spores into slime and smelt the slime into resin. Pop the resin on into a centrifuge and watch it spin into glue and some raw rubber, which we'll use later. And just in time, our sand. Get ready. Time for sifting. And let me tell you, flint meshes produce a hilarious amount of raw ores. I mean, look at this. The only ore we actually care about right now is real gar, which we can use a hammer to smash into dirty dust and then clean that in a cauldron. We could then centrifuge the clean dust to separate sulfur and arsenic from the real gar. The arsenic alone isn't enough, of course, and gallium arsenide is too complex of a dust to be made by my fleshy meat hand, so we gotta make a mixer. Fantastically, we can actually make a Create modified Gregtech mixer that uses 0 circuits and processes recipes at double speeds. Like, isn't that just amazing? Create's the best. It does take me a bit to realize that it still does need EU power, so I kind of have to awkwardly stuff it onto the back of the LV line to feed it both stress units and EU, but hey, this thing is fast. And at this level of crafting, we begin to see higher tier items like fine wires, which we get from turning wires in the wire mill, and foil, which we can get from putting plates into a bending machine. We can now use liquid glass and our new resources and our new dusts to create diodes, which are completely necessary for MV circuits. We're also going to need a new tier of circuit board, which we can make in the assembler using the glue we made earlier, foil, and some wood pulp from processing logs. And that makes the phenolic circuit board. But there's a problem. This board is blank. The resin board we don't have to etch. It's kind of a free pass, but from now on, all the boards we make are blank and need special fluids to etch them. Enter sodium persulfate, our last obstacle to MV circuits, and by far the most complicated recipe we have ever seen. Welcome to Gregtech Chemistry. Strap in, folks. Sodium persulfate comes from sodium bisulfate dust, which we can get from dunking salt into sulfuric acid. And sulfuric acid is a three-step chemistry process that demands a ton of oxygen and sulfur. Sulfur we have, but oxygen feels pretty far away from us. I mean, it's not like we can just reach into the air and grab it, right? Well, kinda, actually. With a gas collector and a centrifuge, we can collect the air around us and centrifuge it into oxygen and nitrogen. Both very useful, but we only care about oxygen for now. Trouble is, the gas collector needs a filter, which needs lapis sheets, and because this pack is designed for ADHD people, you need a special cutting machine in order to make lapis sheets. The cutting machine requires a cobalt brass buzzsaw, which appears innocent until you look at the ingredients list for cobalt brass. It needs aluminum. Aluminum is accessible to us, but is a daunting resource to give away lightly. It's the predominant metal of the MV age, just like steel is the predominant metal of LV. Aluminum can't be sifted or procured from the ore factory, so we have to refine it in a different way. During LV, our only way is to smash up some sapphire ore into dust and use a machine called an electrolyzer to electrolytically separate precious aluminum from useless sapphires. Alright, we've got some aluminum. We're gonna need a lot more of that later. But next up on the list for cobalt brass is, well, cobalt and brass. Brass we have, but cobalt's a bit of a stinker. In fact, we have no access to it at all. No sifting, no electrolyzing, and our ore factory isn't even powerful enough to refine it. But it could be, but we have to upgrade it. The electrokinetic ore factory is a monolith of steel. Yeah, you know, the resource that we have to use for every circuit and every machine and takes forever to make, it's made entirely of that. So let me paint the picture here. We need to make an entirely new, expensive multi-block in order to make a machine that makes lapis plates, in order to make a machine that bottles air. I mean, God, is this even worth it? I could be spending my time with my cats or my family, but then again, it's just one more multi-block, right? I mean, it's one more step. I can stop when I want to. Now, the electrokinetic ore factory is the first multi-block that requires power, so we're going to need energy hatches, which is our way to pass power into a multi-block. These have some really cool properties, but we're not touching on those yet. And when I say this thing is made out of steel, it is made out of steel, a stupid amount of steel. And after lathing, bending, and assembling like nothing else, we are burning deep into our steel supplies, and fearing that I'm going to completely run out, I cave and use some of my precious star tokens in order to buy 2 stacks of the stuff from the shop. This machine is taking all my stuff, but I have to say, it looks pretty majestic when it's built up. We also need to apply maintenance to the machine through its maintenance hatch by clicking this GUI with tape in our inventory, which we're pretty much going to have to do for almost all multi-blocks going forward, but after hooking it up to its own converter, it is ready to go. Except it isn't, and I have tricked you. Ha 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 ha. See, we can't use regular lame water in this thing. We need distilled water, so I have to make a distillery, wire that into the multi-block's power converter, and then use an electrical pump in order to pull the water from the aqueous accumulator into the distiller, and then finally we have distilled water and are actually ready to go. And I have to say, in very short time, we actually find ourselves with cobalt and can finally make cobalt brass. I rushed into making the buzzsaw and the cutter, even filling it with the distilled water as its cutting fluid, since it'll make the machine move actually faster than regular water. And right after I make the lapis sheets, it hits me. All the way back when I made aluminum, the sapphire dust was separated into 2 things. Sure, it made aluminum dust, but it made oxygen. Oh my God, it made oxygen and I didn't even notice. We had oxygen this whole time. I don't need the gas collector. I don't need the cobalt. I wasted all my steel for nothing. Oh wait, no, never mind. We actually needed the electrokinetic ore factory for salt. That's actually really important. Crisis averted. And also not needing to do the oxygen processing line is kind of great because I kind of recorded this entire episode in maybe 1 sitting. Needless to say, it was a relief to avoid a processing line for now. But onto the processing line that I couldn't avoid. Sodium persulfate. Here we go. Step 1. chemical reactor with oxygen and sulfur dust to make sulfur dioxide. Step 2, chemical reactor with sulfur dioxide and even more oxygen to make sulfur trioxide. Step 3, another chemical reactor with water and sulfur trioxide making sulfuric acid. We're cooking now, baby. Step 4, electrokinetically process salt ore into salt and absolutely bathe that in acid to produce hydrochloric acid that we'll use later, and more importantly, sodium bisulfate dust. Step 5, electrolyze the crap out of the sodium bisulfate dust into worthless hydrogen and valuable sodium persulfate. Finally, we can etch our circuit boards! Only one thing stands between us and our creative flight: the electric blast furnace. The EBF is truly one of the most important multi-blocks in all of Gregtech, as starting from aluminum, most of our important metals cannot be smelted by the lame heat of furnaces or bulk blasting fans. We need unimaginable levels of temperature which the EBF can provide. The multi-block consists mostly of input and output buses and the EBF itself, but the important part is the coils. These are starter coils, but we'll actually be making more EBFs with better coils later on. It's a really fun upgrade system. For now, we're stuck with the lowest tier, copper nickel. Copernickel? Cupronickel? Coppernickel. As the name suggests, coppernickel is an alloy of copper and nickel, but we can't use our mixer for this one. We have to make an alloy smelter, but at this point it's pretty easy, and we get to use it again to alloy tin and iron into tin alloy. The coppernickel is then milled into wires, the tin alloy melted into liquid, and all of that is combined with bronze foil in the assembler for our first coils. We'll need 16 of these, and we're ready to construct our blast furnace. We are truly about to enter MV, marked by the great milestone of aluminum smelting. As long as we have enough energy to power it. The blast furnace is an easy build, but aluminum requires MV power to smelt, which is completely impossible for us to access. We can't make NV energy hatches or NV energy converters. So, is this it? Some kind of bug or oversight that's gonna halt our journey right here, right now? No! This is where those energy hatches' really cool feature comes in. Multi-blocks are capable of overclocking. If I add 2 LV energy hatches to the blast furnace, it will overclock it to MV power at the cost of consuming a lot more power. But it is all worth it, because man, does this thing look amazing. And even better as I light it up for the first time and we get to watch our aluminum smelt. It might take a while, but we are on the cusp of the MV assembler in Creative Flight. But it will not be an easy last step. The MV assembler recipe looks just like the LV one, but it requires MV conveyor belts, robot arms, and circuits. We'll need more copper nickel in order to make the motors, and we have to make copper cables instead of tin ones, which are even harder to make as you can't just wrap those in rubber anymore. You need to use liquid rubber in an assembler. We can use a chemical reactor with raw rubber and sulfur in order to make the liquid rubber, and combining that with copper wires in an assembler nets us cables. But all is not so well in the world. I notice our power supply is beginning to croak. The EBF is blinking. A blinking EBF means it's using way too much power, and if the supply gets critically low, the recipe will reset to the beginning and stall until we can give it more juice. In a twist of fate, it seems that our EBF has literally just enough power to not begin voiding recipes and continue to work just about properly. But if we don't deal with that power generation sooner or later, our machines will be crippled. Still, I push on. Copper nickel wires. Copper nickel wires. Copper nickel wires. Still, I push on. Copper nickel wire. I can't do that. I can't say that. We mill copper nickel. We smash and lathe aluminum. Items are pouring out of my factory as my machines drain my ever-dwindling power supply. I craft motors, then conveyors, then pistons. I even make our very first MV circuits, and we are deep in it now. We are getting so close. With robot arms made, the only thing standing between us and the heavens themselves is one machine hole, and we have it. The medium voltage assembler is ours! Finally, the store now unlocks the Jet Boots purchase, and God, it is expensive, but we have made our weight in star coins with all this progression. Using our electrifier, we can charge our boots up and taste freedom, as we are granted creative mode flight. No longer will I fear falling from my base. No more will I hold the crouch key in fear of the deep. Today I have conquered the void. Now we must conquer technology itself. But that is for another video.